A few years ago, I was feeling very lost and confused. A temporary job had come to an end, and I just had a disastrous love affair. And I really wasn't sure where my life was going or what I should do next. And so I resorted to an old tactic. I jumped on a plane. And I flew to Egypt with the idea of doing some walking out in the western desert, which I heard was spectacular beautiful. But any hopes I had of finding some peace of mind there were completely crushed by my choice of guide, Ahmed. He was a nosy, talkative, irritating man who never shut up about how hard it was for a poor desert tour guide to make ends meet without the generosity of foreign tourists. And while we walked through these majestic desert canyons, and we sheltered in these palm tree oases, and we slept under the glorious desert sky filled with millions of stars, Ahmed just couldn't shut up about how hard he worked and how hard it was just to feed his family. And finally, I had to suggest, as politely as I could, and I'm English, it's not easy for us to speak our mind. But finally, I managed to tell him perhaps guides were better seen than heard. Ahmed, of course, fell into an instant sulk, muttering and swearing under his breath, shooting me dark looks from time to time, but I really couldn't care less. I was finally just so happy to hear myself think. We had this great day walking, with the wind being blown all directions, and the dust picking up, and little whirlwinds, and towards the end of the day, we came towards these caves on a rocky hillside. And we chose one of the caves to shelter in for the night, and I went back in with my torch to make sure there were no wild animals there, while Ahmed tried to get a little fire going. I didn't find any wolves or snakes, but what I did see took my breath away. On the walls of the cave were ancient paintings. Maybe they'd been made tens of thousands of years ago, and that would have been amazing enough. But there was a detail in the paintings that just made my jaw drop. The people in the paintings had tails. And not thin, graceful tails like a cat or a monkey might have. I'm talking big, thick, crusty tails, more like a reptile. And some of them sat on their tails coiled up beneath them, high in the sky, while other people, and these ones didn't have tails, fed them food and drink on the end of long poles. I said, Ahmed, have you seen these paintings? Were they made by people who used to live here? Did they really have tails? But Ahmed just looked up from where he was blowing into the fire and said, "Guides should be seen, not heard." Well, I knew him well enough to know what the best thing to do was, which was to pretend to lose interest. So I took a seat opposite him by the fire and just began to stare into the flames. But I could see the struggle going on inside him. See, on one hand, he wanted to maintain his sulk and make me feel bad. And on the other, he wanted to show me just how much he knew about this area and increase his chances of a good tip. Finally, he couldn't help himself. And he said, "Yes. Yes, the paintings were made by those who used to live here. And yes, they had tails. Not everything your scientists are knowing. Their tails were like the lizard. They fell off. Every time they said something untrue. Every time they did something dishonorable. Their tails fell off from the very shame of it. I said, yeah, but not everyone in the paintings had tails. So who is telling the story? Yes. There was born a generation so evil, so sinful, so untrue. They could not go 5 minutes without lying, or cheating, or stealing, or doing something wrong. Their tails never grew at all. Next to them, those with tails felt even more honorable, even more virtuous. And they started sitting up on their tails, up high. And the one who sat the highest, he was the purest of all. But pride comes before the fall. One day, they called for their breakfast. No one came. They clapped for their tailless servants to come and serve them. There was no answer. The tailless sinners had run away in the night, leaving their masters to starve upon their tails of purity. One by one, they tried to get down. One by one. They fell to their death. And that is why we live in such an evil, sinful world today, descended from those evil, tailless sinners. And that is why even a poor desert tour guide could hardly feed his family. Ahmed got his tip, okay? Not that I believed a word of his story, but somehow, even if he had made the whole thing up, somehow there was something true in the tale.